Tom Cotton is a Republican politician, and he is going to go after China on Fox News here, and it's going to be, because of COVID-19 and how they covered it up. Let's see what he has to say.
Tom Cotton, you went out early on this, and I remember watching, and I'm looking, and I'm listening, because I've always viewed you as very credible. I wasn't sure of it all. Did my own investigative work. I didn't have a definitive answer. I still don't. But I'm listening to what you're saying and what Brett's saying. What do you think? Where do you think the story leads?
Well, Sean, since January, I've said it seems to be highly coincidental that this very contagious virus originated just a few hundred yards or maybe a couple miles from laboratories where the Chinese Communist Party researches coronaviruses. Brett Baer's reporting tonight, if it bears out, shows that the Chinese Communist Party is responsible for every single death, every job lost, every retirement nest egg lost from this coronavirus. And Xi Jinping and his Chinese communist apparatchiks must be made to pay the price if that turns out to be true.
Well, they certainly hold a lot of America's debt. Is that an area where we could perhaps get compensation?
We can examine that area, Sean. I think we need to make the American courts open for lawsuits against Chinese communist leaders. I have legislation that would modify the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act to do just that. I think we're going to begin to see a massive shift of manufacturing capacity out of China and back to the United States, or at least to friendly allied countries, which would be devastating to the Chinese economy. But just imagine, not just in America, but all around the world, the demands for accountability and consequences on the Chinese Communist Party and Chairman Xi if it turns out that Chinese negligence and then Chinese corruption and treachery was responsible for unleashing this pandemic on the world.
So let me explain what's going on here. The whole thing about, well, let's open up the U.S. courts so people could sue China for damages as a result of COVID-19, that is a complete and utter waste of time. And Tom Cotton knows it's a waste of time, and I think it's irresponsible that he would lead anybody to believe it's anything but that. You're not going to get anything out of that. We play this same goofy game where, people in our silly, backwards ass minds, that doesn't make sense, but anyway, we were like, oh, Iran did 9/11. They didn't. But so we're going to allow the families of the victims to sue Iran. This is all just, and here's the main point, guys. This is all about deflecting blame. Now, did China early on lie about it? Yes, they did. But we learned pretty early on that, oh, indeed, they were lying about it. There is human-to-human transmission. And even after we learned that, our government dragged its feet for over a month. Trump famously giving rallies talking about how, this is the Democrats' new hoax is the coronavirus. And, he famously in meetings was swatting aside Alex Azar, who was saying like, hey man, this is serious. And, we have a real problem on our hands here. And he says, oh, you're being alarmist. You're being hyperbolic. Larry Kudlow famously going out there saying, we got it down airtight or close to airtight. Trump saying, oh, it's 15 people and soon it'll be down to 0 and this is taken care of. So fact of the matter is, if we did basic pandemic preparedness, we wouldn't be in this situation that we're in today. But the Trump administration and Tom Cotton, who's a big defender of the Trump administration, these guys don't want to shoulder any blame at all. So what do? Oh, just point the finger at China and say it's all them. We did nothing wrong. It was all them and they lied all along. And so if you want to blame anybody, you blame them. You don't blame us. That's really what's going on here. Now, the problem is Tom Cotton is one of the worst neoconservative hawks in all of Washington, D.C. That's not an exaggeration. And he wants to escalate this conflict. He is totally fine with being in a new Cold War. So if his language sounds a little vituperative and a little over the top, that's on purpose because that's who he is, and his end goal is to escalate towards war. This is a guy who famously never said no to any of the wars. He loves all the wars. He's one of those guys who talked about how Guantanamo Bay is awesome and we need to do more torture over there. So this is not a good dude. And this is not like a dude standing up for justice or whatever. This is a dude trying to deflect blame. The only part of that I agree with, or I should say the only part of that I would like to see, is when he talks about supply chains and he's like, oh, supply chains are going to come back here. No, they're not. Dude, I wish supply chains would come back over here, but they're not going to do it. Why? Because the corporations make a hell of a lot more money by having, paying some Chinese children next to nothing to create their goods and then ship it here. Now, it is true, okay, but in a time of crisis, you want to be dependent on China for your supplies? That seems insane. But the bottom line is, we're not making these decisions based on rationality. We're not doing that. The decisions were made to go over there in the first place solely based on profit. And that calculation has not changed. These people are still going to make a hell of a lot more money if their supply lines go to China. So while I wish it was the case, that we'd have the supply chains, we'd start manufacturing a lot more here, it's not going to happen. And it's a real shame because that's the only thing he said, of everything he said there, the only thing he said that makes sense is, hey, let's have more manufacturing here and we don't have supply lines going back to China. I wish, dude, that would have been wonderful, but that's not going to happen. But here's the downside. Everything else he's saying will probably happen. There will probably be the ability to sue China in court, and of course they're not going to play along because they don't have to. We don't have jurisdiction over them. That'll probably happen, and will probably continue to escalate in a new Cold War type way. So, and there's a consensus now too. It's not just Tom Cotton saying this. It's Trump blaming China, and it's Biden now blaming China too. So, as usual, it's not that, oh my God, we need more bipartisanship. No, we don't. We have bipartisanship, and it's terrible because the two parties agree to deflect blame towards, a foreign country so that they could wash their hands of all their problems. And the other things that the parties agree on, you know this, but serving Wall Street, serving Big Pharma, serving the for-profit health insurance companies, serving the military-industrial complex. So this is where we are, but they're saber-rattling now. The Hawks are out in full force, and they're going to do everything in their power to make it so that you don't blame them and you blame China, because then they get off scot-free and you won't punish them electorally. Electorally? Electorally.